You know, it occurred to me, I have not had one person this year yet tell me Merry Christmas. You never hear it anymore. Thank you. You hear Happy Holidays sometimes, but not Merry Christmas anymore. In case you can't tell, I love Christmas. This is my favorite time of the year. And there's a few reasons. One is because I didn't get to celebrate Christmas till I was 37 years old. The other is because this is the time of year that even non-believers are forced to hear about Jesus. I mean, it's everywhere. And they don't have to believe in it, but they still see crosses everywhere, hear songs sung to him. I mean, people say, Christmas is all about the gifts and so forth and so on. Well, what was the best gift that we ever got? God set the example by giving us gifts, didn't he? So that's why I like it. It's to me, Christmas is all about a relationship with God, and it helps remind me why that is. And so we're going to talk a little bit about relationship with God tonight. The name of this message is, have you taking what is set apart? Now, we're going to start by reading in Joshua chapter 6. And let me set the stage here. You all, or most of you probably are familiar with the story of the walls of Jericho. Remember, there was some scouts went into Jericho, and they talked to a prostitute, and she hid them from the soldiers who were trying to get these scouts. And so she asked at this time, people were scared to death of the Israelites. All nations were scared to death of them because the Israelites conquered everybody they ever battled with. So they really were terrified, and Jericho was too. Well, this prostitute, she hid them, and she made them promise that God would spare her family. So they hung out a little rope out the window, and that's the only place of the wall of Jericho that didn't fall. God told them to walk around the walls, the city, 6 days in a row, one time. On the seventh day, they were supposed to go around it 7 times, blow their horns, shout, and when they did all that, the walls fell. So this is where we're at. We're going to start in verse 17. And here Joshua is telling them what God said to do. But the city, now this is after the walls fall, this is the order. The city and everything in it are set apart to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and everyone in her house will live, because she hid the messengers we sent. But keep yourselves from things set apart, or you will be set apart for destruction. If you take any of those things, you will set apart the camp of Israel for destruction and make trouble for it. For all the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are dedicated to the Lord and must go into the Lord's treasury. Now, before we go further, I want to point out 2 interesting things here. One is that it said that if they did, Israel would be in trouble. It didn't say if some guy goes and takes it, that guy's in trouble. Israel would be set apart for destruction if this was done. The other thing is, there's 2 things it talked about. It talked about things set apart for destruction and things set apart to go into the Lord's treasury. And we'll touch more on those later, but I wanted you to pay attention to those 2 points. Now we're going to read Joshua 7, verse 1. The Israelites, let me back up. They defeated Jericho, okay? Now they are coming up against another nation called, I can't remember what it's called. Well, it's IA, something like that. EIEIO? I don't know. But this is a small nation, okay? So Joshua sends out the scouts to go check out this town. They come back and say, this is a small nation, not a lot of people there, so there's no need to send all the soldiers. Just need to send 2,000 to 3,000. Okay, great. So Joshua sends 3,000. And here's the mightiest nation in the world at that time. They're protected by God. And they turn around and run by this smaller nation chasing them. And this smaller nation actually killed 36 of their soldiers. So naturally, Joshua's like, what happened? We had these guys. What happened? Well, this is where we're at now. Chapter 7, verse 1. The Israelites, however, were unfaithful regarding the things set apart for destruction. Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of what was set apart, and the Lord's anger burned against the Israelites. So, again, Achan did this, but God's anger was against the Israelites. Now, let's go to verse 11. The Lord then said to Joshua, that's the wrong one. Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant that I appointed for them. They have taken some of what was set apart. They have stolen, deceived, and put those things with their own belongings. This is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They will turn their backs and run from their enemies because they have been set apart for destruction. I will no longer be with you unless you remove from among you what is set apart. So, have any of you in this room ever stolen anything? I have. And truth be known, as we read through this, everyone in this room has stolen something. Okay, what's the topic we're talking about here? We're talking about stealing from God, aren't we? So we're going to cover 2 points. The first one is things that are set apart for destruction. In other words, things that we take upon ourselves that create a distraction for us from God or separate us from God in some way. So what are some of those things? Well, we all here have struggled with hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And they separated us from God, didn't they? They caused distractions in our lives and sometimes still cause distraction in our lives. Here's the biggest one for the entire world: money. Money is a big distraction for God. It separates us from God because it becomes our Lord. I struggle with it because I worry about it so much. And that's something God's been working on me. He says, stop worrying about it. I take care of you if you just trust me. We went to a Christmas pageant at Sevier Heights this weekend. And the pastor gave a really interesting message about the nativity scene. He said, notice in the nativity scene, everyone there is focused on Jesus. He's right there in the center. And he started moving the figures around, putting one in place of the other, putting them in the center where Jesus was, making the point that we lose focus and we start focusing on the wrong thing. So, like he takes a wise man, puts it there where Jesus is. Now all these people are focused on knowledge and education. He takes a sheep and puts it there where Jesus was. He said, well, what can a sheep be? Well, most people these days have animals because they enjoy them. So this is things that we enjoy. So hobbies. I'd rather go fishing than go to church. I'd rather go hunting than go to church. I don't want to go shopping. Who cares if I have enough food for the family? Now I may be being extreme here and may feel like I'm picking on some people, but the point is, do our hobbies and things we enjoy in our life take the place of God in our life? Entertainments. employment. How many of us here put our jobs ahead of our families, ahead of our relationship with God, ahead of everything else in our lives because we're afraid that if we lose that job, we're going to lose everything else? Well, that's not the case. There's a lot more jobs out there. School. I'm amazed how many people today are career students, well into their adult years, 50, 60, 70, still going to school, and they never do anything with it. Now, I'm not saying it's bad to get education, but is that a distraction for you? Is it something that's set apart for destruction because it takes your focus off of God? You know, throughout the Bible, it talks about God being a jealous God. A lot of the Old Testament talks about several gods, and I've noticed in my studies, one of the main ones it talks about is Baal. And God is very jealous, and he admits it. He says, I am a jealous God. Why is he jealous of false idols? Why is he jealous of us giving our time and anything else, our focus, on something that's really unimportant? Why does he care if somebody worships an idol? They're not a real God. Well, how many of us are in relationships, whether you're married, engaged, dating? Why is it that you get jealous when your significant other is looking at another person or talking to another person? It's because their attention is no longer on you. It's focused on someone else, and you'd rather it be on you. Okay? God feels the same way. Remember, we were created in God's image. So naturally, he's jealous. He created us. He wants a relationship with us. Therefore, he gets jealous when we give it to something that's not important. So now the second point. Set apart for God. Remember that there was gold, silver, bronze that was to be set apart for the treasury of God. So, what things have we taken in our lives that are set apart for God? Things that build up our love, faith, and trust in him. Can you think of any? Volunteer time? Serving at church? My wife and I and Corey and Deanna on the prayer team, we all serve at our campus, and I think I can speak for them, and when I tell you, it gives a lot of enjoyment. Yeah, we're all worn out today because we spent the whole weekend, as several others of you here, getting ready for Spectacular. But we're still here because it means so much to us. Tithing. Tithing is something that people don't like to go to church for because they don't like to hear it. They don't like to see the plate passed and things like that. But why is God so focused on tithing? He doesn't need money because it symbolizes your trust in him. That's all it is. Our value is so tied into money that he realizes that if we can trust him with our money, then he's made an extremely large step in our relationship with him because we're willing to give up control of one of the most important things in our lives. So that's why tithing is so important. Church attendance. Nobody notices if I'm here. A lot of people today say, they quote the scripture where it says, where two or more are gathered, God is with them. That's true. But they use that as an excuse not to go to church. I worship God my own way. Well, how about you worship God the way he says? Because the Bible also says, do not forsake the gathering of yourselves together. And why is that? Because we encourage each other. That's why Corey's always talking so much about small groups. And we love our small group. Small group is where you really meet God. Okay? Church helps us. We get encouraged. We get fed spiritually. But small group is where we really get to know God. Because you're in a room full of people that love God. And it's a family. It's a small family. You become very reliant on each other. Small groups help you financially if there's a problem. If you're sick, they're there for you. They're there for you just to talk to if you're feeling down. There's so much benefit in a small group. It's hard to really explain all of it other than saying it's a family. So if you're not in one, I'm sure Corey will appreciate me telling you this, you need to get in one. Because that is, again, where we really get to know God. The only way we can get to know God better than in small groups is our own personal Bible study, which is another thing that we might take from God, something that's set apart for Him, is Bible study. Let me ask you this question. A lot of people in here probably still are not convinced about God. They're not quite sure it's real. Here testing the waters or having doubts. Well, you know wind is real. You can't see wind. You want tangible evidence. Well, you can see the results of wind, can't you? Good and bad. Because a lot of people say, well, if there was a God, why is there so much bad in the world? Well, there's wind and we know it. Tonight we're supposed to have thunderstorms and it's probably going to cause some damage somewhere. But on a 100-degree day, we love the wind. It feels great. The internet is not a bad thing. It wasn't created to be bad. It accomplishes a lot of good things. We can read the Bible on the internet. We can reconnect with family on the internet and old friends. There's a lot of good things that come out of it. You can get jobs that way. You can work on the internet. But whoever created the internet did not intend for there to be predators on the internet or people who steal identity and things like that. Just because there's bad things in the internet does not mean it doesn't exist. There's good and evil. And so what you have to do is realize that, accept it, and trust it, and at some point just make a decision whether or not you're going to believe in it. And these are the kinds of things that you start to learn. You have to look, you say you want tangible evidence. Well, tangible evidence is what you experience in small groups. Tangible evidence is in this room. Once you make a decision to become a Christian, and everyone in here who has done it can tell you, you get that evidence. You can feel Jesus in your life. And the more you participate in these things that we've been talking about tonight, like small group and tithing and going to church, the more you feel it. Another benefit is the love and support you get from other people. Examples of that are, how many of you appreciated when Heather was up here giving her testimony? Or Todd Wyrick, was it last month or the month before that, was up here giving his testimony? Those are some amazing stories, weren't they? Did you benefit from them? Did it help you realize I'm not in this alone? Somebody understands what I'm going through. You're in a room full of people that understand what you're going through. That's evidence, tangible evidence. So, what we need to do is examine our lives, examine our motives, and ask ourselves, am I taking something from God? Am I bringing something into my life that God has set apart for destruction? Something that's distracting me from building a relationship with Him? Or am I taking something that God intends for me to have in my life? Something He set apart for Himself, namely a relationship with us. Am I neglecting that? These are questions we really need to ask ourselves. and ask God about, because He will reveal the answer to you, and He'll help you understand where you're doing that. Because we like to live in neglect, don't we? Or not neglect, what's the word? Denial, thank you. Live in denial. And we have a hard time seeing where we're failing sometimes. So go to God in prayer and ask Him, where can I make improvements on this? Because a lot of times we don't even know.